Welcome back to Man vs. Weed, the Cannabis Entomology Review Podcast. I'm your host, Tango Hotel Charlie, coming to you from smoky Kamloops. It's a burning hellscape here in BC, and if you don't believe in climate change, you're nothing short of an absolute moron. But we're not here to discuss the obvious. We're here to look at cannabis from the perspective of a 30-year vet. Today's sample is Romulan by Palmetto. Palmetto is a shell brand owned by Sundial growers. Sundial has been around since the beginning of legalization in Canada. Once valued over $1 billion, they have since plummeted by over 80%. Sundial is based out of Calgary, Alberta, and also has operations in the UK under the name Bridge Farm Group. In the 3.5 years since legalization, Sundial has had no less than 3 compliance orders from regulators, stemming from multiple complaints about their facility in Olds, Alberta. Turns out they were making employees use isopropyl alcohol to remove labels from stupid plastic jars in rooms with inadequate ventilation. When they made this determination and sick workers started seeking medical attention, rather than fix the ventilation issue, they decided to start cycling workers in and out of the same room. But obviously that just meant more sick workers, and they continued to seek medical attention. This prompted the emergency medical services personnel to be called to the facility. They treated 18 people in the facility for symptoms including headaches and lightheadedness. 14 of those needed to be transported to the hospital. After, a spokeswoman for Sundial said that all workers had returned to their duties, and that health and safety are key priorities and core values at the licensed producer. But that occasionally these kinds of unfortunate events can occur. I don't know. Taking a shit happens attitude towards the health and safety of your workers kinda seems contradictory to your key priorities and core values. Sometimes when people see me getting shitty cannabis from the LPs, they say I must be super unlucky or something. Apparently I'm not the only unlucky purchaser. Sundial once sold another LP a half-ton of cannabis that had to be returned. That LP was Zenabis. Constant listeners will recognize Zenabis, known for low-quality, high-priced weed contaminated with bug parts. So if they returned it, you know it must have been bad. Turns out the reason they returned their half-ton weed purchase to Sundial was because it contained mold, bits of rubber gloves, and, I quote, other non-cannabis material. What the fuck? What are these idiots doing that there's a piece of glove, let alone enough pieces of glove, and a half-ton purchase of cannabis that it needs to be returned? Also, what the fuck is a non-cannabis material exactly? That could be anything. Of course, in their IPO filings, they conveniently left out any mention of 554 kilograms of returned moldy rubber glove weed. They also forgot to tell investors. Oops. When asked about it, corporate communications manager Sophie Pylon said, "I'm not really sure what you're referring to," then refused any follow-ups. Deny, deny, deny. Analyst Tammy Chen summed up their quality when she said that their dated dried flower is deemed not competitive on the recreational market under certain qualitative criteria. Listeners of Man vs. Weed will be familiar with this qualitative criteria. Examples include low potency, lack of terpenes, small bud size, inconsistent color, and flower so low potency it wasn't even suitable for extracts. Ouch. The Sundial's growers facility once boasted about growing premium cannabis that could be sold at 4 times the going rate. That's right, the high price was a feature that they sold their brand on. However, former employees describe a less than premium experience while working there. They report multiple fires that caused the destruction of hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of cannabis and equipment. They also described incidents of moisture, mold, and fungus, with one of the most egregious stories being a basement nursery in the facility. This nursery experienced frequent flooding and, according to first-hand accounts, that water contained septic material. Shit water. When asked about the fungus and mold, Sundial's CEO responded saying, all cannabis plants have colony-forming units. He said that those colony-forming units include mold and that Health Canada regulates acceptable levels of that mold. That's right. You heard me. Acceptable levels of mold, approved by Health Canada. In addition, the CEO also said, on occasion, water can drip from the ceiling-mounted dehumidifiers, and acknowledged a, quote, minor drainage backup, and that the LP had to destroy cannabis plants because of these conditions. This tells me that the former workers were telling the truth. Yuck. Now, like I said, they have plummeted in value by almost 90%. They're not selling 4 times the going rate, and during coronavirus they have continued to lose sales, even when the other shitty LPs are reaping the benefit of the deadly pandemic. So they had to make changes, and those changes include switching from a wholesaler to brand marketing. Those brands are Top Leaf, Palmetto, and Grasslands. You know, the standard shell game grift. But the other thing they're doing is money lending. Turns out consulting and money lending are 2 underrated grifts in the legal cannabis landscape. They teamed up with an investment firm called the SAF Group to form Sunstream Bancor. Sunstream makes me think of golden showers, and that seems pretty on brand. Basically, they're pivoting to a culture vulture venture capitalist firm that eats off cannabis startups and helps pump cash into other shitty cannabis shell brands. Now all that brings us to today's sample, Romulan by Palmetto. A little man versus weed context. I don't research these LPs until after I smoke their product. For better or worse, because I'm not sure I'd be so willing to smoke it after hearing about septic matter, rubber gloves, and acceptable levels of mold. So just know that when I open the jar, I'm blind to that information. Romulan is a hybrid indica. This sample was 20% THC and was packaged May 24th, 2021. It was $22 an eighth, that's $6.30 a gram, or $176 an ounce, plus tax. For comparison, this price would be top shelf on the black market. On the legal market, this is considered cheap weed, that you get what you pay for. If you want quality weed, you're going to have to pay a higher price for it. They try to compare it to expensive whiskeys that require years of aging. I can't even get into the fact that if you're comparing alcohol and cannabis, you already lost. It came in a stupid plastic jar, except this one was fluorescent orange, so money well spent. When I cracked it open, there was some odor in the jar. It wasn't great. Musty, earthy, kind of unpleasant actually. Inside the stupid jar, they included a moisture pack. On the scale, it was on weight, and my first impression was that it looked quite nice. This was one of the first samples on the legal market with decent-sized buds. Nothing crazy, but not bud crumbles either. The buds looked fresh and felt moist. The flowers were mottled shades of green with accents of orange hairs. Mostly well trimmed with a few leaves and no hanging stems. At this point I was feeling pretty good about it. Relatively low priced, decent looking cannabis. At this point I got a little ahead of myself and rolled a 1-gram joint. Here's where the illusion started to flicker. When I broke it up, it went from feeling fresh to feeling dry and powdery. That's the illusion of the humidity packs. What they do is regulate the relative humidity in a space. If you have a properly dried and cured bud, it goes in and the pack regulates the space it's in. If the bud is dry when it's going in, it's going to absorb moisture from the air. The pack detects low moisture and replaces the moisture in the air. Now the bud appears more fresh, but the damage has already been done. The volatile cannabinoids have already been lost, and they'll never return. Furthermore, only the outside of the bud that is exposed to the air regains that moisture, while the inside stays dry as the interior BC during wildfire season. So rolling it up was a pain in the ass as it was falling out all over the place, but I managed to get it done. But it was at this point I realized I got ahead of myself and I had forgot to take a look at it under the microscope. Good thing I got an eighth. So I grabbed one of the fattest buds in the stupid fluorescent orange plastic jar. The trichomes looked decent, mostly intact, and an assortment of clear, cloudy, and ambers. But then I spotted something. Almost immediately. It was another one of those black fiber-looking things I've seen on other samples. Hopes dashed again. I looked at all of them, and I found more on each bud. Sometimes you gotta really inspect them, and sometimes it just pops right out. I believe they're fibers and not hair because they look smooth. To my knowledge, organic material usually looks rougher and has segments or cells, where these things appear to be strands of synthetic material. Knowing what I know now about the company, I can only assume that it was rubber gloves or non-cannabis material. At this point, I'm feeling very trepidatious about that joint I rolled. It's a catch-22. I mean, at least you don't know what's in it, but you don't know what's in it. You're playing Romulan roulette with your lungs. And I didn't sign up for some game of Romulan roulette, but I got a podcast to make, which I'm beginning to think is bad for my health. But I took one for the team. It burned fairly well for septic material, and the ash was light gray. The terpenes could only be described as gym sock full of pencil shavings. It was very harsh on the throat with a bitter finish on the lips, roof of your mouth, and throat. I'm going to assume those terps are derived from non-cannabis material. The high was pretty understated and medium strength at best. Overall, a quite unenjoyable experience. When I came back in after smoking the joint, I wanted to triple check my work, so I put every bud back under the scope. This time I was able to reproduce my previous observations, but I also found something new. Exciting, right? Wrong. This thing was a long, thin, almost clear-looking strand of fiber. I wanted to make sure it wasn't part of the plant, so I followed it. It was woven deeper inside the bud segments and wound up and around the length of the bud. I had to twist the bud in my fingers to follow it up through the flower. Now, if you're seeing it at 60 times magnification, then you know it's tiny. And you can't see it with your naked eye. Believe me, I tried, and I wanted to pick it off. I don't know what the fuck this is, but I know you don't want to smoke it. I know I don't. So, would I recommend Romulan by Palmetto? Unless you're an employer forcing workers to inhale toxic fumes in a poorly ventilated grow facility, I would have to say no. That's a hard pass for me. Thanks for listening to another episode of me poisoning myself with toxic legal weed. If you would like to support the show, make sure you like, subscribe, and tell all your weed-smoking friends to check it out. If you've already done all that, or can't be fucking bothered, then just twist up some craft cannabis, get high as fuck, and free the weed.